All right, hello everyone. Greetings from the Figge Art Museum. Thank you for joining us tonight. I just wanted to welcome you all to our Thursdays at the Figge virtual series here at the Figge. And I want to give a big shout out to our friends, Chris and Mary Rayburn. Chris and Mary Rayburn sponsor projects like this, our free Thursdays at the Figge, and they're part of the reason we can offer free programs like this to you guys. So my name's Heather Aronson. I'm the Education Programs Coordinator here, and I'll be hanging around in the background, helping things along. But it's my great pleasure to introduce our Director of Collections and Exhibitions, Andrew Wallace. Take it away, Andrew.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Heather. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our indebtedness to the forebears of our region. As most of you know, the Figge is sited along the banks of the great Mississippi River, within and on the traditional lands of Meskwaki, Sauk, Ho-Chunk, and Missouri peoples. Tonight and hereafter, we honor all indigenous nations with gratitude and acknowledge the history of genocide and displacement of indigenous peoples from their ancestral lands. Our acknowledgement of the harms inflicted upon indigenous and BIPOC communities across the country and around the globe guides and informs our work as a museum dedicated to bringing art and people together. I had the pleasure of meeting poet, author, and artist Ray Youngbear by phone several years ago. Interestingly, it was Lesley Dill, a Mainer, New Yorker, who introduced us to residents of Iowa. What I had read of Ray's work convinced me to invite him to contribute an essay to the catalog for our recent exhibition, Magnetic West. Although Ray was at first unconvinced by my invitation, I knew that his interest in art and youthful explorations of photography, through that I knew that his words would be invaluable to the Magnetic West project. His essay, Journey to Where the Sun Descends, is for me a highlight of that experience, and certainly working with Ray directly on the project was also a wonderful experience. So any of you who have not seen his essay or the Magnetic West catalog, I encourage you to take a look at it, and because I think it is exceptional, and Ray's work is wonderful. So we are blessed to have worked with Ray now, not once, but twice. Ray provided input for Lesley's research on the recent Wilderness project and Wilderness Light Sizzles Around Me, but he also contributed an insightful poem which appears in the exhibition and also in the catalog. For those unfamiliar with Ray and his work, he's a member of the Meskwaki Nation, an award-winning author and poet whose works include Manifestation Wolverine, the collected poetry of Ray Youngbear, the Rock Island Hiking Club from 2001, the University of Iowa Press 2001, The Invisible Musician, Holy Cow Press 1990, Winter of the Salamander, The Keeper of Importance, Harper and Row in 1980, and Waiting to be Fed, Gray Wolf Press 1975. Youngbear is also the author of Black Eagle Child, a wonderful book published by the University of Iowa Press in 1992, and The Remnants of First Earth, published by Grove Press in 1998, which received the Ruth Succo Award for Outstanding Work of Fiction about Iowa. He has received numerous honors and awards, including a 2016 American Book Award, a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, and an honorary doctorate in letters from Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. He has taught creative writing and Native American literature at the Institute of American Indian Art, Eastern Washington University, Meskwaki Elementary School, the University of Iowa, and Iowa State University. Youngbear and his wife Stella are the co-founders of Woodland Singers and Dancers. So, without further delay, our friend Ray.
Greetings. Thank you, Andrew, Heather, for lining me up with this presentation tonight. My name, as introduced, is Ray Youngbear. In Meskwaki, through the Bear Clan Association, it's Kagadu, K-A-K-A, parentheses, A. Kagadu is my Bear Clan name. I'm a tribal member of the Meskwaki tribe, except for several years of college. I'm also a lifelong resident of the Meskwaki settlement. I'm presently 70 winters in age. Our tribal homeland in central Iowa was founded by Bami Wanigat, a hereditary chief, in 1856. The founder is my maternal grandfather. Around 1955, my introduction to education began at the Sacafox Day School here on our tribal homeland. Grades K through 6th were attended. In the fall of 1964, on or about, much to my shock and surprise, I attended the first year of high school through the South Tama Community School District. I went to a small community nearby called Montour, Iowa. It was 7th grade and 8th grade there. As I said, it was a culture shock having white kids as classmates. Therein, I realized in 7th grade that 5 long years would be spent learning at South Tama. That task seemed monumental and therefore intimidating. Then, as if by divine intervention or a simple misunderstanding of a writing assignment, a teacher advised me one day I had composed a poem instead of an essay. Regardless of whether the teacher was right or wrong in her assessment, my question as to what's a poem became a 50-year endeavor into the craft of writing. We've just undergone a dreadful year of the pandemic. It's been so full of stress and grief that one of the outlets that I've chosen has been helpful for me, which is poetry, as well as photography, as well as essay writing. And I thank Lesley Dill, for recommending my work to Andrew, wherein he offered this commission for an essay, which proved to be quite challenging because the task at hand was to compose my thoughts on the field of photography. That seemed very awesome, yet an honor at the same time, considering that I've held the camera since the age of 16 to present. In tandem is poetry. It has walked alongside photography, hidden all of my roadblocks, oftentimes enmeshed in severe bouts of self-underestimation on my abilities with the English language. But I persisted throughout the years, regardless of the rejections of a lot of literary magazines, and it's something every aspiring poet or writer should get accustomed to. For myself, it seemed somewhat double because English, after all, is a second language. And I'm going to speak in my Meskwaki language briefly so that those in my community and those elsewhere will know that I speak the Meskwaki language, halfway proficient. I do believe I write in the Meskwaki language as well. So, Ekojimegubia ni Kankanayang, Kakanutamaan Mukamahang Kakimunan. Kenesh Pikuan Kamika Mamahan, Pansahiran 2015, your Oxenabia, Nakimek and Epihamanin, Pakim Ekumunan. Poetry or poems, Shishkadan. Senapai Aktor. Poetry. makaja meta kishit. Port man do ishikada mo jahit mo kumanda at tapos edug tanaina. Jahini bekwimun ito si Deyo. Ito pinakashkag si unay aji mundakta inimpek bekwimun. Jahini mahani poetry ishkade. Jahabahan huwigyan nakan kisha kakret pakte cita yang ki kwede pihikyan sa lagat awi bajin inatuan siya mo mago kenoso tanusa mek nanahi pihikya jahan eskuchi mekni alat mahani katanu tama excuse me back to English. I'm going to read a part first that describes the Meskwaki settlement. This one is some remnants of the first herb, the second novel, and I'll just simply read it and break off and read a few poems. But I love the introduction. It fits perfectly with the Meskwaki settlement, my home. Preface. The wish that Bearkin had. At daybreak, the Black Eagle Child settlement, home for 1,500 tribal members, protrudes as a geographic anomaly against the flat, rural horizon of central Iowa. When seen from the west several miles out, especially along Runner's Bluff, the settlement resembles a tree-covered island encircled by monotonous vistas of cornfields, pastures, and grazing livestock. If it weren't for the gray rounded hills that rise slightly above the drifting layers of fog from the Swan Root and Iowa rivers, we would be indistinguishable, literally. In these few hours before the fiery orange sun ascends the wooded terrain, replacing the foggy shroud with clear daylight, it seems as if this place, my home, is momentarily surrounded by the wide, sweeping waters of an invisible ocean called eventuality. If you look down further into the drifting fog and think deeply about dreams that make you prepare to leave for an unknown destiny, an inner sense of fear never fails to conjure a serpent-like image of a supernatural, seeming to pause in its wondrous swim before flicking its massive tail. In the boil and wake created by the mythical sentinel, treacherous waves crash noisily along the shores of our borders. On occasion, the shadows or souls of certain individuals lose their footing here and tumble headfirst into the surf. You wouldn't think it, but the consequences of a single loss upon our clan-based society is devastating. More so when we are few to begin with. Yet, this metaphorical Earth Island is where 3 generations of my grandparents, Wawidai, on either side, flourished in order that we would have a chance at some undesignated point to carry on where they left off, performing error-free ceremonies to guide believers through the murkiness of the cosmic earth laws. This, according to my limited knowledge, was the original wish of Berkin, the settlement's founder, to find a sanctuary where generation upon generation would flourish and maintain the customs that would forever identify them as Black Eagle Child. What makes our tribal homeland distinct is the fact that a small Algonquin dialect-speaking world has been in existence here legally for the past 140 years. As startling as it may seem to some, my great-grandfather, through his status as a living divinity, secured the initial purchase of property from the state of Iowa in 1856. That's where the legally comes in. After centuries of warfare with the European newcomers, in which our predecessors barely pieced themselves back together, my grandfather, who was a young Ugima, or sacred chieftain, provided the answer by implementing his exclusive birthright to obtain acreage in our former dominion. Since a government-enforced order of exile had to be defied to facilitate a return to a region that was once a source of fierce territorial contention, solidifying the destiny of the Black Eagle Child people was not easy. But after persecution by different colored flags that would have made others succumb, splinter, or simply vanish, our acquisition of real estate was the only logical solution. And this would come about, and it did, only through the wish and actions of a single but blessed person by the name of Bear King, Makwi Ukimam. That was his exclusive role as a savior to rescue us from suffering and ensure our survival. That is pretty much a reflection of the Meskwaki settlement that was written around 1994, 95, published by Global Atlantic in 1997. I take great pleasure in going over my works of fiction, largely because I'm of the opinion hypothesis that I channel myself creatively. Some of these passages I really don't remember, and oftentimes I'm impressed by them enough to wonder who wrote that. And when I get to that phase, I know that I spent a lot of energy toward something. I've made myself the king of revision, obsessive, compulsive, whatever. I sometimes overdo it, overkill, but that comes from my upbringing of self-underestimation. So with that, I'm going to take a drink of water and then proceed with some poetry for you. One second. We are here at 202 Red Earth Drive on the Meskwaki settlement. My wife Stella and I moved here 2001 with our family at that time of 5 adopted kids. We eventually had one more, so we had 6 kids total at this residence, plus Stella and myself, making for 8. It was quite an interesting time with our kids here. 2 are still at home, about to start working, proceed with their own lives, etc. And we've all been there, those of us who are 18 and 21. And so I wish my family well, their endeavors. The very first poem I'm going to read for you is for my grandmother. This was written about 1969 or I think it was roughly 1969 or 1970 when I flew out west to Pomona College and gave it a try with academia. If it wasn't for the culture shock, perhaps it would have been all right, but I was so homesick that one of the positive things that resulted from Pomona College was that writing poetry kind of held off the loneliness. While I had been to summer school before then, being away for a semester was something else. But one of the poems that resulted then was for my grandmother, Nukumasem. It is one that has traveled far and abroad as well. If I were to see her shape from a mile away, I'd know so quickly that it would be her. The purple scarf and the plastic shopping bag. If I felt hands on my head, I'd know that those were her hands, warm and damp, with the smell of roots. If I heard a voice coming from a rock, I'd know, and her words would flow inside me like the light of someone stirring ashes from a sleeping fire at night. I probably composed that in the fall of 1969. The clouds through this light, another poem from California. These horses were tainted and yellow when dawn first brought the cold, making my breathing like an old man's, cautiously coming through a blanket soaked with tiny red suns. Last night rains came to a black whisper, wove its tail, and moved after my grandfathers, still smoking the offer I gave while they were here. The clouds threw this light into the horses, and they were revived by the rumbling of their bones. I stand cradling my rifle and notice the day humming, swinging my little sisters to sleep, back and forth inside the old house. Excuse me. Got 2 poems so far from California. Oasis. I often saw you with towels wrapped around your head, hanging over your eyes, rubbed with the shadow of woman's oasis smile. At dusk, car lights always gave you away at your usual place, walking the ditches. My mother said you cooked each meal, or your mother laid in bed, unable to stand, looking out the window till night. Did you ever, did you ever think about the white Arabian horses that I buried by the stream? There's a poem about my culture shock. Water College is situated about 35 miles east of Los Angeles, right along the San Gabriel Mountains. I recall as soon as the smog lifted one fall afternoon, there were some mountains there, snow-capped, that were incredibly lovely, that really took me away, and I wanted to go see them. However, that was a misperception on my part. I thought they were real close, but it was a very good lesson to learn that mountains are often more far away, not close to campus, as I thought. Like a coiled wire is the poem. I am sitting in a hallway. Ahead of me, I feel the sound of my legs brushing against each other through the stiff new pants. Like a coiled wire, I am walking through friends and relatives. We each had to tell each other that we didn't belong to be far away from home, away from the idea of what we should be. In this hallway, I woke up into a fog wearing brightly colored clothes and I found myself again. Even then, I couldn't believe the presence of mountains. And when, after 3 days had gone into my life, I decided to walk to the mountains. I kept walking over and coming upon hills and rows of houses, and the white rocks on their roads finally made me realize that the mountains were too far. I thought to myself, they're going to take that away from me as well. Trying to fill the empty spaces in my mind, I became the train I rode on, passengers without direction, racing through dark tunnels, gently in, between, and out of sleep. My body convinced we are home because of the way the birds sing and that echo. Those are poems from my youth. We're going to fast forward, read some of new poems from Manifestation Green. Manifestation Wolverine, for your information, is a collection of 4 books. I'm very glad Open Road Media gave me this opportunity to have a collected edition. Shall we read from here? I'd like to read this one. This one's for Robert Gish and his daughter Annabeth Gish. Robert was a professor of mine here at Iowa, at University of Northern Iowa. And Annabeth Gish, who was an actress via Hollywood, was maybe 9 or 10 years old at the time when Robert and I were at University of Northern Iowa. I was taking independent study, and he was my counselor and teacher. And proved to be a lifelong friendship with Robert. So this is a poem for Robert and Annabeth. Annabeth, we do not know, was in what's it? X-Files, excuse me, science fiction. Science fiction is also an endeavor of mine. Presently, I'm writing an essay about my experiences along with Stella's with UFO encounters here on the Meskwaki settlement. I've had 3 personally with Stella, 2 by myself elsewhere. So, moonlight craters on my legs. Throughout my investiture as a word collector, there were extraterrestrials disguised as well-meaning Scandinavians. You'd think they would have told me stuff I should have known about or expected, like rat claw messages on doors and other supernatural revealings. Except for a couple of visits, there was never any unfolding, no alien to human communiques, nothing to comport their omnipresence except suspected implant movement. Quote, twice sub-epidermal bullet-shaped devices readjusted on forearms for reception, I wrote. The side effects consist of physical extrusions like unhealing wounds or toenails coming off, regenerating. Based on which body part is most susceptible to injury, the implants calculate where to skin surface. Rash outbreaks thus riddle my thighs with scar tissue, confusing my specialists. Periscopes, I tried to joke. Finally, with fresh tissue depleted, they relocated. taking refuge in my toes. At the slightest shoe discomfort or a sun-decked sliver, the feet suffer. At least the podiatrist watches X files something. Oh, in a swimming pool once, he lets me convey, I scraped my knee via antibiotic bandages. The wound could hardly recoup. End quote. Liquid immersion interfered? Yes. Chlorine in Albuquerque. He listens with keen indifference as I recount our metabolic and intuitive natures. But showers also provide access to distant acts of sexual depravity, like that time I received a Yosemite killer's license plate letters before his last life-taking. Another time I ascertained in a drunken hallway scuffle between lovers, I got shin kicked accidentally. The device reversed into the bone. Oh, there, the scar is crescent shaped and indented like moon craters. Well, we're here. I should talk about the project that I was with Andrew Wallace. This is the book itself, Magnetic West, the enduring allure of the American West in photography. I've got a 2,500 word essay in here that pretty much occupied much of my year of the pandemic. And I'm grateful to the Figge Art Museum, Andrew and Lesley, for their work and everything else. I'm just totally impressed by this book. A lot of Native American photographers, a lot of famous American photographers are in here. And I was hoping to read some more, some passages from here, but I'll leave that. I should also mention that I've also written a poem for Lesley Dill for her art exhibition at the Quad Cities in Davenport at the Figge. And if you have a chance to go see it, I recommend it. It's a 4-part poem regarding the founding of the Meskwaki settlement, and it's written for my grandmother and my grandfather. So thank you, Andrew, for that and keeping me quite busy throughout the year. I should also mention another person who's been contacting me. I'm very grateful for Joy Harjo, who is a U.S. Poet Laureate, third term, and through her, I published 2 or 3 poems also in the year of the pandemic. I'm extremely grateful to all the sponsors, all the editors who've given me a chance. And at 70 years of age, I'm ecstatic whenever these invitations come in. Before I read some more poems, a couple more, I should ask Andrew, how much more time do we have?
Hi, Ray. You have, I think you've got 15 minutes or so. If you like.
All right. There was something that just popped into my head. Oh, yes. As we are progressing into our second year of the pandemic, unfortunately, I am already looking forward to several essays that are in the computer. Not only that, I've been contacted by an organization out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, by the Mulball Family Foundation. I will be joining a team, a group of writers and poets, and the plan is to develop an oratorio. My input would be to write poetry concerning some interactions in the mid-18th century. So it's going to be a very interesting endeavor. Again, it'll keep me busy. I think there's some more things that like, there's something with the Iowa Poetry Association that should be in September. And then in February elsewhere, but I'll mention it as I go. But here are a couple poems that I'll read and close off with. The latest poems. This one's called For Hinterland Abstractions. This was published in the New Yorker. One second. As many poets know, it's very difficult to get into the New Yorker, and so I was pleased when Paul Muldoon, the former editor of the New Yorker, accepted For Hinterland Abstractions. That was in 2015. Then he took another group of poems in 2017, and two opposite poetries. One is modern poetry, and the other one was Meskwaki poetry, which I was able to sing for the New Yorker. The first one, For Hinterland Abstractions. 1. Today, a truck carrying a Tomahawk missile reportedly tipped over on the interstate somewhere. Labeled an unarmed warhead, its fabulous smoke had to be placated with priest-like words being murmured by yucca-wielding authorities, and while covering the dormant but cross entity with tarps that had paintings of blue mountaintop lakes, they affirmed their presence with nudges and reminders this valley was sculpted by the once lovely wings of a vulture. And here is where you will quietly attend to the disorder we heard plainly over the traffic's ubiquitous din, and before a smoldering star's song. 2. From one winter night, an inquisitive firefly has directed itself toward my 3 children, and through its testament of cold light, floral patterns appear over their snowy tracks, replacing shadows with light that's detailed and compelling us to place ourselves beside the weeping willow grandfather, to ask him, please behold the witness. 3. Previously, as a winsome ghost that's awash in green and yellow, pulsating colors, it taunted the blue healer named Simon Simone Essay, who lunged thereafter, fish-like into the night, arcing its scaled torso in order to bite the protoplasmic wings. So make note of this psychically attuned defender I scratched on the frosted car window without looking around. 4. On a hot, windy afternoon in downtown Waichir, he walked across the street from where the dime store used to be. Pointing to a remnant column, he said, "Que me cuenta yo after? Do you recall what used to be here?" Having just arrived from overseas and wearing boots covered with ochre grains of distant battlefields, he reached down and crushed several into small clouds that sped over the sidewalk as I nodded yes. Those are 4. And I'll probably conclude by reading that one more. And then if there's any questions, I could probably field them. But it all depends on the hookup with our internet, I guess. And my son assisting me here, Michael Ryder Youngbear. He is a MMA fighter. He's had thereabouts here, so I'm glad to have him stop his kickboxing practice and join me to make sure everything all set up here. I should also mention that I'm in the process of finalizing my nonfiction manuscript. Hopefully, I'll have details in about a month time or less to let you know what the next books are. I'd like to conclude with Ultrasound, the Missing Plane, Down Under. It's a title of a poem that I wrote for plane overseas that was never found. And it just piqued my curiosity as to what may have happened. I think that was about 5 or 6 years ago, or perhaps more. But here's the last point for you. Ultrasound, the missing plane, down under. In the technician's bony but supple hands, a body-seeing instrument charts the oceanic topography of my syrup-laden torso. After being jostled about, my kidney winces as it minutely assembles its sponge-like shape through the kinetic sounds of valleys and mountains being strewn across the vast floor by an eagle's wing. Then, before supper and while discussing the missing, it makes a clairvoyant projection, quote, Willie Gulch, end quote. A pensive teenager, the one named Youngbear, who's also our son, and who said to see what others can't, pays special attention as a description is proffered. Quote, it's a place along the west coast where divine winds originate, and I fear that's the only clue, end quote. Later, however, under the influence of a smothered burrito, the kidney confides her direction of red dust storms is where airliner might be located. Notes and quick sips of cold beer are taken as a song. Helena beat plays on TV in the next room. Silhouetted by the screen's flashing light, a loquacious kidney with fork and coffee in hand surmises the prehistoric tangent is Kalgoorlie, a subterranean connection where echoes from a chasm near Perth, Australia, have taken searchers too far out. With the medical scope retracted, the visitor politely takes leave of the table, leaving us like untouched plates on intricately woven reed mats. And before we knew it had started, the Hinterland rite was done. Only in dreams thereafter would we recall how this presence remained stationary in the current by oscillating its bright yellow fins. Thus, from a faraway place where memories and inverted stars were assuredly beneath the coral reef, we are overwhelmed, if not transfixed, by the water's primordial sanctity. Thus concludes my poetry reading for this evening. I thank you one and all for joining me at my home here on Red Earth Drive of the Muskoka Settlement. And I would hope that you would fare well as we venture on this ship going to the second year of the pandemic. I think I was the first one in Tama County to put a mask on, and I'll probably be the last one. It was somewhat uncomfortable. March or April, I can't remember when I donned the face mask, but it was uncomfortable at first because I was the only one and receiving stares at the grocery store in Tama, Toledo. But uh, it's for safety and my well-being and for everybody. I would hope that those who have been apprehensive about getting the vaccine, it's high time you get one. And for others who've gotten your vaccine shot, it's also a good time to keep your mask on. I think COVID-19 just mutated and it's back, unfortunately. Andrew, do you have any questions from anybody?
I'm waiting for Andrew to unmute. This is Heather, but I do see we do have a question from a guest. Andrew, do you see the question?
Oh, yes, yes, I see the question.
Wonderful.
Before we get to the question, Ray, I want to share with you Lesley Dill's words, who is in attendance, and she writes that it's such an honor to be connected to you and to your words, and to be able to witness your courage and your vulnerability through your poetry, and to be able to learn more about you, your family, and the Meskwaki. Randy Lewis asks, how and when was the connection with Lesley Dill made? I don't know if you recall, now it's 2-3 years ago, maybe.
She began, as Lesley started by sending me a package, a manila envelope package with her artwork, and oftentimes I receive material unsolicited from aspiring authors and so forth. And unfortunately, you have to pass on those because it's quite consuming for somebody asking you to read 500 pages of their novel. So you have to politely pass. And what caught me was the artwork that she sent, and that she was planning to do an art show, and basically one step led to another. I think I communicated with her by email, and then it's just been a year, if not a year and a half, since that time of communication. And I'm glad that we were able to swing this, and I need to finalize it with my family by taking a trip before her show expires soon. So I'll be headed down to with my family to see Lesley's show, hopefully before fall or before the show ends. And I thank her as well. So it's good to hear from Lesley. Thank you, Lesley.
So Ray, Lesley writes again, she would love to hear more of your Meskwaki language. So if there is a poem in Meskwaki that you would like to read, that might be a lovely way to end.
Okay, that's a good one. There's a couple real short ones, and my son and I were planning to sing and share some dances. However, there was a person passed away in the community, so custom demand that one refrain from singing and dancing. So some of the songs that we were planning on doing are songs that I made several years ago. And I was just talking about my son, Michael Ryder, Youngbear. When he was about 3 or 4 years old, he was enthralled and obsessed with horses. So much so to the point that I decided one day to compose a song for him. And I wish I could sing it, but I'll just try to just read it in English and Meskwaki, and this will be my chosen one for Lesley. Micah Ryder's song. Hi ho silver, Kanawo, Nekatuska Shahano. Hi ho silver, Kanawo, Nekatuska Shahano. Bisha Jipaho, Bisha Jipaho. Hey, we're gonna go riding, Etana, Ikan. Hi ho, silver, I said to my horse. Hi ho, silver, I said to my horse. A fancy run he does. A fancy run he does. Wanna go riding, riding, he said to me. So this concludes my poetry session. Thank you very much, one and all. So, Andrew, we shall talk soon, I hope. And then,
So, Ray, before you go, we have one additional question. And right now I'm sharing a picture of a youthful you.
No.
You can see.
Yes.
The question is, you had mentioned this teacher who either rightly or wrongly referred to your what you had written as a poem. And do you remember more about that incident or
But I'm getting lost. I see the picture, but I don't know what poem.
so when you were a youngster and you were writing and you were struggling with being English as a second language, and you had mentioned writing in class and the teacher mentioning that your work was more of seemed like a poem.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know more about, can you recollect more about that experience?
Yes, in fact, I've developed several theories about pedagogy and its importance upon minorities or people of color. Unfortunately, we have teachers who disparage people of color like myself, and I've oftentimes reflected to 1964 on this seventh grade teacher, English teacher. Largely, I questioned whether she was correct in her assessment of my abilities to write an essay. As you can look at it from two perspectives. One is, but my thought is that I did so well that the teacher got jealous because all the other kids didn't do as well. So her way of disparaging me was basically come up to me and said, "You didn't write an essay, but instead you wrote a poem." But I'm beginning to think that if she had issues with who I was, a Meskwaki, then perhaps the essay that I written was probably okay. It was just a teacher that was perhaps apprehensive in my abilities and assessed it wrong. But whatever happened was, I guess, intended to happen, because as a result of that, I've questioned for nearly 50 years now what is poetry. And so, in a way, I have to be grateful for that teacher, whether she was good in her assessment or whether she was off. It really doesn't matter, because the poetry that eventually was written is still being written 50 years now. And right now, we're just circling back with my writing ability. I think I'm done with as much as I can do, the creative element. So what I've learned, I need to get back with my Meskwaki language and then write in Meskwaki fully, exclusively. I think this is where I'm headed. And at 70 years of age, there's not much time left, obviously. So it's very important for me to delve into the Meskwaki lexicon and to write narratives based on my experiences. One, I started out several years ago with writing about an alligator that I saw. Of course, who sees alligators in the Iowa River? Well, I did at a very young age. That's one. Another time was another incident where I write in the stories about the time I went shooting a huge carp fish. And, there again, it's all in the story. And how I went back home and what my grandmother said when I plopped a giant fish on the table, referencing masculine. I can't get into it, but it's a reference for somebody that hunts well, but I ended up laughing and being embarrassed because it was a reference to the body and so forth. But I wrote it in Muskogean, and it's I was laughing all the way through. So those things I'm working on, and I'm hesitant at the same time about listening to tape recordings of my father, late father, as well as my late grandmother. So those are two tasks that lay waiting for me. And to hear their voices will be hard, but I asked them to do it in 1980, and they were receptive. Now I just got to step back in time and make sure I do the proper translating, editing, and so forth. But I'm so glad that I kept going, never gave up. So this concludes my reading. Andrew, are we done?
Wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
All
you,
right.
Ray. It was a pleasure, obviously, for all of us to hear you. And obviously, we should go out and buy all your books.
I
That's on
actually
my
just
reading
did.
list. Because that was just wonderful. So we thank you for that. And I am indebted to you, I know, and the Figge's indebted to you.
Likewise, Andrew, Lesley.
For your contributions to we're lucky, 2 projects. And despite the fact that we had this pandemic, we had this wonderful association and creative association. So I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you, Andrew, Lesley. It's been a wild, creative year.
Great. Well, with that note,
I just wanted to say thank you to both too. And I was laughing, Andrew, because literally I had my cell phone with me and I used my Amazon app and I totally bought your book, Ray.
Thank you.
It'll be here Sunday.
All right.
I'm really excited.
Enjoy it.
I will. I enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much for taking your time tonight with us.
and thank you for your family for
right.
letting us share the space.
All right. Now I can get back to cluttering my home again.
Okay. Have a great night. Thank you.
Days. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We will have this video posted to our YouTube channel in a few days. So if you want to see it again or would like to share it with friends, please do. We do have a number of virtual and live events coming up, so make sure you check out our website. And just as a little teaser, we do have free admission for just through this Saturday. So please come down and see Lesley Dill's exhibition or become a member and support programs like this. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.